There we go. So today we're going to work on lesson 3. And lesson 3 involves using selections. And selections are found in the upper left-hand corner. We have, of Photoshop, we have the elliptical and the rectangular marquees. The ones that are rarely used now, but in the past were used for web design, or the single row marquee, or horizontal and vertical. I haven't used them in ages, and I mean years. But the rectangular and the circular we use pretty often. Beneath that, we have 3 more. We have the lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic lasso tool. So we will be using all of these today. Probably the most powerful ones, though, are found here. The object selection tool, the quick selection tool, and the magnetic selection tool, or magic wand, rather. Sorry, magic wand. So these are the tools we're going to be using today. And this will be, this is important to take note of. It's sort of a lead up into your first assignment, which will be to do the postcard. Now the postcard, just to give you an idea, you won't start on it until next week. But I state that you should do it in black and white, but I'm going to give you an option. You can do a black and white version, or you can do a color one, or both. It will be up to you. But what you'll be doing is similar to what we're doing here right now, is that you're taking elements from one photograph and combining them with another. And the goal of the assignment and the goal of this exercise is to do it seamlessly, so you can't tell where one photograph begins and the other ends. It just looks like that's how the photograph was taken. That's the goal. And then later on, if you want to make it more obvious, or you want to make another kind of aesthetic decision or artistic choice, that's entirely up to you. So we're going to start this exercise by selecting each one of these. We'll start with the sand dollar, and then we're going to look at the coral down here, and then the shell here, and then more coral here, and then we have the screws, and then we have the muscle at the very end. We're going to take them and we're going to place them in here. So as I said, to be consistent, I'll try to do this with every exercise, but what you always should do, I'm working 2 up right now, 2 vertically, so that I can see what the end result is supposed to look like. And I can, at the same time, work on the start file. So we're going to start with a sand dollar here. And I probably want to click over here and zoom in a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. Okay. Now you'll notice with the start file selected that I only have 1 layer. That's not how you want to continue to work, because problems will occur if you work on 1 layer. Really, the goal is, with most projects, is that you're going to want to isolate each of the images and have them be on their own individual layers. So let me show you what happens when you work on the same layer and see what happens, which is very different if you've worked in a program like Illustrator. So I'm going to go up to image, and I'm going to go to image size. See how big this is. And this is this is a good size image. This is 300 pixels per inch. And it's, you know, 5 by 6, it's postcard size. So when you guys are working on your postcard project, that's about the size that you want it, either 5 by 6, 5 by 7, something like that. 300 pixels per inch. Okay, so I always look just to see what we're working with here. And you can see that we have rulers up. If you don't, it's Command R. As I said, I never like working on my background layer. So what I do is I select it and I hit Command J to make a copy of it and turn off the background layer, should I need to get back to any of the original images in the future. Okay. So first step, let's go ahead and working on a single layer. And this is what I don't want you to do, or repeat what I don't want you to do, but I want to show you what happens if you accidentally do this. So what the tool that I'm going to use is the quick selection tool here. And I'm just going to move over the sand dollar and I'm going to click and drag just a little bit. And notice that it knows by color range and by value range, it knows the difference between the background and the sand dollar. So now what I want to do is I want to move it. So if I do that and I use the move tool, you'll notice that the icon changes to a black arrow with a pair of scissors. And I'll click and I'll drag and I'll move that over here. And you'll see how it wrenches it from its background. And I can do that and I can deselect and it's in place. I'm all done. But now watch what happens. What if I decide later on that I need to move the sand dollar? Then I'm going to have problems. So let's do that again. Let's use the quick selection tool. Select the sand dollar. I'm going to move it back into place and look what happened. It functions like a cookie cutter. It just cuts it away from the background layer all the way to transparency. Now, if I turn on that background layer, you won't be able to tell the difference. So that would be a good reason for making a duplicate before you get started. Okay, so I'm going to undo a couple of steps just to take me back here. So again, I'm working with two layers. The background layer is turned off. I have the selection of the sand dollar. So what I want to do is make a copy of the sand dollar and put it on its own layer. The easiest way to do that when you have the selection is to hit Command J. That takes that selection. Watch when I turn off the layer one. There's that sand dollar isolated on its own layer. And if I want, I can begin to rename these. So I'll name this one frame. And I'll name this one sand dollar. Because there's so few images and they're pretty easy to detect, you generally don't have to name the layers, but sometimes when your images are really small or you have lots and lots of layers, it's a good idea to name them. So we'll name this one sand dollar. Okay, so I know which one is which. And now I can use the move tool and move it into position. And by doing it that way, I've done a couple of things. Number one, I haven't damaged the original. So I still have this one if I wish to use it again. I've also placed this one on its own layer, so I'm free to move it, delete it, do what I want with it. Okay, now is that clear to everybody? That's really very important. So let's move on to the next one. Let's move on to the plate with the shells and what is it, coral in here. So I'm going to go ahead and move over to this one. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can get a good size image of it. There we go. So I can see that in its place. So because we want to, I mean, technically, yes, we could use the quick selection tool. And with a little bit of, of work, we could, a couple of 2 or 3 clicks in here, we could get everything going here. It's a little bit more complicated than the other. So just to let you know, the quick selection tool is still my go-to choice for making selections. And if you just continue to click and drag, if you're missing parts, it will add those to the selection. And if you want to remove parts of it from a selection, you hold down the Option key. And that's true for all the selection tools, or marquee tools, or whatever you want to call them. And to deselect a marquee, it's Command D or Control D if you're working on a PC. So another tool that you could use that is very, very quick, and it's generally another go-to, and this is new to 2020, is the object selection tool. So I want to make sure that I have the correct layer selected, which is the background layer, not the one with the sand dollar, because when I go to make a selection here, it will be empty. But if I select like so, just make a rectangle around it, it's going to know that I want to select that. So that would really be the best choice. But that's not what we're going for in this lesson. We're learning how to use the ellipse selection tool, or the ellipse marquee tool. So to use these tools, the rectangular marquee tool or the elliptical marquee tool, typically to make a selection, you go and you click diagonally to make the selection you want. Okay. So you'll notice that I didn't get it. If I try to go diagonal, no, that's sort of working, but I'm trying to center this, and that's not working for me. So there are other ways that I could release this and resize it, but what I want to do instead is I'm going to make the selection from the center of my selection. So I'm going to release this, Command D to deselect, move my mouse to the approximate center of the plate, right here. And I'm going to hold down the Option key and click and drag. And see how close I am to being in the center of the plate. And then as I, position my mouse left to right, top to bottom, we can see how close I am. I'm off a little bit. So if I need to move the selection while I continue to hold down the mouse, while I continue to hold down the Option key, I also want to hold down the space bar, and that allows me to move my selection before it's complete, because once you release the mouse, it's a done deal. So now what I'm going to do, since I thought I had found the center, but I hadn't, I will now move it to the center or close to the center of my plate. Now I can let go of the space bar, and I can continue to hold down the Option key and move the mouse. And what I want to do is I want to make the selection just inside the plate. I don't want to go right on the edge because it will capture some of the outlying pixels. Okay, so this is close enough for our purpose. It's pretty darn close to the edge here. Now I'll release the mouse first and then the Option key. Now I have my selection. Now I can hit Command J. I've made a copy of it, and I'll rename it plate. Okay, and I'll zoom out, Command minus key or Control minus key, and using the Move tool, I'm going to move it into position. That's not bad. That looks okay. So the next one that they want us to make is we're going to select the coral here. So I'm going to zoom in again. I have to make sure that I have not the plate or the other sand dollar layer selected, but I need to make sure that I select the home or the frame or the background layer. And now this is going to be a two-step process. And just to let you know that you can use any of these selection tools in combination with one another. You don't have to use one or the other. So what I'm going to do is a two-step process. I'm going to start with the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to click and drag around the coral. But to go around this with any of the other tools, like the lasso tool or the polygonal lasso tool or whatever, it would just take forever and it would not be that accurate. But what I could do is I could take and I could select the magic wand tool, and because the background is white, I can remove all the white from the selection by holding down the Option or Alt key. If you're on the PC, it's the Alt key. On Mac, it's called the Option key. And as I hold it down, you'll notice that I get the little minus sign underneath the icon. And now when I click, Notice that all of those pixels, those white pixels had been removed, and I have a perfect selection. Now, the quick selection tool would work equally well. Probably, or rather not the quick selection tool, but probably instead the object selection tool. But I just make a rectangle around that, and that would work. So now what I can do once again is hit Command J, make a copy of it, put it on its own layer. I won't name it this time. Zoom out. Switch to the Move tool, or hit V on the keyboard and move that up like so. Okay, so we've got half of these done. Now, do you need to use any of these? Sometimes you have to experiment and use them in combination with one another to see which ones, or combination of which ones work best. The next one that they want us to use, I need to make sure that I select the frame layer next, is under here, we're going to use the magnetic lasso tool. And I don't like looking at the icon there, that little icon. So if I put caps lock on, you're going to see a little brush symbol. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag, or click and move the mouse, click and move the mouse very slowly. And it will detect an edge. If you go too quickly, you might have a problem. So, and it is fixable, but you do have to go in a clockwise or counterclockwise fashion with all of these. And as you can see, as I go really slow around here, it's detecting the edge of our Nautilus shell really, really nicely. There's a little glitch there that we'll have to come back and fix. So I'm just moving the mouse slowly. And you can see that if I move off a little bit and I make a mistake, I'm going to have to come back and fix those. But that's not a problem. You just keep going. Don't try to back up. It's much harder if you try to do it that way. So now I go around and I go around. So until I get back to the start. And when I get back to the start, it switches from the brush tool back to that icon with a little circle on the lower right-hand corner. So now if I click, it makes a complete selection of that object. But you'll notice that I made a couple of mistakes here. So I need to zoom in and see, where those mistakes are, if I can remember. And you can see I need to remove some pixels from here. So to do that, I'm going to come back and I'm going to use the lasso tool. And I need to remove these pixels. So I hold down the Option or Alt key. And I click around the area that I want right here along that edge and drag like so. And then I drag out here, grab those pixels, and they're gone. So now I've made that fix. If I needed to add to the selection, I would hold down the Shift key and click and drag like so. And notice how I've added to the selection. So I undo to get rid of that. Now I'm going to go back over here. And here's that other little section here. I could also, if I wanted to, I could use the Polygonal lasso tool. Really doesn't make any difference. And I can click here and hold down the Option key and click and drag, and it kind of rubber bands around this. Click, click, and then move out here, come back to the beginning. And now it's been removed. So now I have a really nice selection, almost perfect. Good enough for our purposes for this lesson. Okay, so once again, make sure that I want to make a copy of it, put it on its own layer, and then move it into position. Command J or Control J. And let's go ahead and zoom out to see where we need to go. Let's go ahead and use the Move tool or hit V and move it into position. Like so. Okay, so far so good. I'm probably doing really well on time. Yep, we haven't even used up a half an hour for this. This will be a quick lesson, unless there's questions from some of you. Okay. So the next one that we want to do and is the muscle here. And the tool that they recommend is the lasso tool. My hand-eye coordination with my mouse has never been that good. I'm a left-handed person, but I use the mouse with my right hand, and it just is very awkward for me. So what I have chosen to do to work around that is I'm going to use, instead of the lasso tool, well, I will select the lasso tool, but if I hold down the Option key, watch what happens. If I click, it turns into the polygonal lasso tool when I hold down the Option or Alt key. And I can go around the edge here, try to go in just inside the muscle a little bit and go on small little steps all the way around and just move the mouse a little bit and click until I get, the results that I'm going for. I want to try to get a nice tight selection of this. So I'm just moving the mouse a little bit and working kind of with straight lines. If you have a Wacom tablet, then maybe you could use the lasso tool a little bit more effectively. And I have one, but I don't use it all that often. I probably should. So I'm going around it, just like so. Probably could be a little bit closer to the edge, and we can fix that too, if we want. That would require a little bit more advanced techniques that we'll get to in lesson 6. And again, you have to go all the way around until you get back to where you start. There you go. Now you can see I've kind of underdone it a little bit in some areas. I haven't gone outside, but I want to add to the selection. So that's what I'll do. I'll hold down the Shift key this time, and I'll click and I'll drag around here a little bit, around that. If I have to zoom in a little bit more, it wouldn't be a bad idea, and grab all those pixels. And I've added, so let me zoom in even a bit more. Okay. Hold down the Shift key, and grab those pixels. Hold down the Shift key, click and drag around here, and grab all those pixels. Just doing it in little sections here. Again, hold down the Shift key. And just freehand grabbing those pixels like so and adding to my selection. I'm just being kind of particular with this at the moment. And it's not a bad habit to get into. And even though, you may not be using this tool a lot, not like you used to, but when you do use it, you do want to be kind of finicky about your selections. They can really make or break your project. And you just, when you're using it for yourself, use the tools that work best for you. You won't be restricted to the lasso tool or the magnetic lasso tool or anything. But it is important to know about them, to decide for yourself, which one would be best for you. So I'm pretty much satisfied with all of that. And if I zoom out, I'm good for the time being, or at least for this lesson. Command minus to zoom out. And now what I want to do is I want to move this into place. So again, I need to make a copy of the layer first. Command J. Whoops. Because I have the wrong, it can't do that because, see, I forgot to select the right layer. So select this layer here. Command J. Now I can zoom out and I can use the move tool to move it into position, but it's facing the wrong way. So how do I fix that? Well, that's where we use the free transform tool. The free transform tool is found under edit, and you'll see under free transform, it's Command T. You're going to use that a lot. You're going to probably want to keep that in mind and write that key command down. So since this is on its own layer, I can hit Command T, and you'll notice the little rectangular box appears around that. If I move over one of the corners, or just outside of the corner, there you go. Notice that I get a little bent arrow, double arrow, and that means that I can go ahead and I can rotate it. And it's a free rotation. If I want to restrict it to 45-degree increments, then I hold down the Shift key. And now it's perfectly vertical, and I can move it into position. And then when I'm done, I can either select the checkbox up here, or I can hit the return key, or I can go ahead and I can select the move tool, and that fixes it. But again, it's on its own layer, so you can always turn it off, turn it back on, and you're set to go. So the last thing that we're going to do in here, very quick, easy lesson, but it could take you time to get acclimated to using the elliptical marquee tool, using the magnetic lasso tool, and also the lasso tool. Those take a little bit of time. So now what I want to do is I want to create a selection for the screw by itself. And I want to put the same screw on each corner. Okay, and at the moment, if we go to view, we should have smart guides selected. So let's go to snap to guides, new guides. Smart guides are there up automatically, so they should be visible. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in on the little screw. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently than I did before. Zoom in, get a nice tight selection of it. I'm going to use the elliptical marquee tool. And if you recall what I did before, I held down the Option or Alt key to create it from the center outward. But to make it a perfect circle, if you also hold down the Shift key, then that will constrain the proportions. And as you can see, I have not centered it. So while I have my fingers held down on the Shift key and the Option key, and I also want to hold down on the space bar. And then as I drag the mouse, I can move the selection before it's fixed and get it centered on my selection here. And now it's centered. That looks pretty darn good. So now I let go of the mouse. And now I can let go of the Option and the Shift key. And I have that selected now. So now I can hit, make sure that I have the frame layer or that background layer selected. Hit Command J to make a copy of it. Zoom out. And now I need to move it into position. So I use the move tool and move it into place, but you can see that it's just way, way, way too big. So I'm going to zoom back in, like so. And now what I want to do, now you can see that my selection isn't that great. I goofed. See that little extra section up here? I have time today. It's only 2:32, so I'm going to undo all that. I'm going to go back to where I was. And let me show you a way to fix that. Okay, so let's undo that again. And there's my selection. So what if I want to just tweak that selection just a little bit? What I can do is I can go under Select, and I can say that I could either do a couple of different things. I can say that I want to modify it, and I can say that I want to contract the selection and make it smaller. or I can do something different. We can go ahead and we can transform selection. And it brings a little box around it. Now I can either move it by maybe using my arrow keys a little bit, down arrow key a little, or I can move the little handles on there and make it smaller. But as I said, all you have to be is 1 pixel on the edge or outside to create or to select pixels that you don't want. Now that I'm done, I can go ahead and I can click the checkbox again. I can zoom out. And I'm going to go ahead again and I'm going to hit Command J, make a copy of it. Let's move it into position. Let's go hit V. Yeah, that's better. That looks much better. I could probably even do a better job. But again, I'm going to put it into position. So that clearly is just way, way, way too big. So how are we going to fix that? We're going to hit Command T to transform it. But if I'm not careful, you can see that I can squish it or stretch it. I don't want to do either one of those. I want to constrain it from the center outward. So if I hold down the Option key and the Shift key and then I drag over the center, I can make it smaller like so. And that constrains the proportions. And then if I want to rotate it a little bit, I can and move it into position. And then I can fix it. Now, to make copies of that, we do what we've done with the others. Okay? Make sure that I have that layer selected and hit Command J. Now I've made a copy of that layer. Now I can proceed to move it. And as I hold down the Shift key, you'll notice the little pink guidelines indicating that it's constraining it so that it's perfectly horizontal, the movement. And I can do the same with this one. I can go ahead and hit Command J again to make a copy of that layer, and then I can proceed to use the Move tool, and again hold down the Shift key to constrain the movement so that it's perfectly vertical this time. I can zoom out just a little bit. And again, one last time, Command J to make a copy of it. Use the Move tool to move it. Hold down the Shift key to constrain the movement of it. Get it in a position, and I'm good to go. And then the very last thing that we need to do is we need to crop it to get this out of here, get the bottom stuff out of here. So I'll select the crop tool, make sure that delete crop pixels is unchecked, and now I can move this up from the bottom here a little bit like so. We can really tighten this up a little bit if we want, so that we have our finished. But if you want, we could get rid of, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Let's do that. Make sure that this is all pretty even. I can do that like so. And we need to get rid of these pixels down here, and I'll show you how to do that. So now that I can go ahead, I can crop it, but I still have the little gold or the brass section from down here. Well, I want to make a selection of that, and I want to fill it. So what I need to do is, and this is what I would do, you know, if I were working on this, because these are all have their own layers. So I want to go ahead and I want to select every single layer that I've created. So if I move over to the right in the layers panel, and I click the very top or that first layer that I created, which I named Sand Dollar, move down to the frame layer and hold down the Shift key and click there. You'll notice that I have all of these layers selected now. Now what I want to do is I want to combine them all into one. Now if I hit Command E, that will do that, but then I lose all of the original layers. So I don't want to do that. I want to hold down the Shift key, the Option key, the Command or Control key on the PC, and then hit E. And now what I've done is I've combined all of those, but I've left all the others intact. If I hold down the Option or Alt key and I click that, you can see that it's all combined now into one layer. And I still have the ability to turn that layer off, turn the others on, and edit. So I've worked in a non-destructive way. Now, to get rid of this little brass part here, I can use the rectangular marquee tool, and I can select this area down here. And now what I want to do is I want to fill it with the white or the foreground color. So to fill it with the foreground color, you hold down the Option key or Alt key on the PC, and you hit delete, and it fills it with the white, that color. Now I can hit Command D to deselect, and I am done. Do any of you, before I end today, this will be a short, only maybe 45 minutes today, and that's it. Do you have any questions for me about what I've done? How would you, any of these, would you like me to redo them for you? Or do you want to just later on watch the video and play it back? So you can see how I've approached this. Again, more often than not, you'll probably start by using the Quick Selection tool or the Object Selection tool. Those are the most powerful selection tools, and then you'll use the others as ancillary tools to refine your selection. But for right now, it's just a way of learning how to use all of them effectively. Can I combine layers again? Sure, I can. Let me undo a couple times. Let me come down here and undo a couple times. There we go. So I've got them all back. So there's different ways. Let me pull off the layers panel so you can see what I'm doing here. So here are all of the layers that I've created so far. Now, if I wanted to add drop shadows to any of these items, I would probably want to do that now. And if I wanted to, I could leave this intact as is. But in the future, if you ever want to combine layers, then select one layer. If I hold down the Command or Control key, I can select individual layers. And if I click on them again, it deselects them. That's the Command or Control key on the PC. If I click off of it to deselect, but if you want to select a whole bunch of them, click the top one, hold down the Shift key, and select the last one, and they are all selected now. Now what I want to do to combine all of them but leave all of the originals intact, I hold down the Shift key, the Alt or Option key, the Command or Control key, and then the E key. And that combined all of them, but it left all of the originals intact. To view just the last one, you hold down the Alt or Option key, and that turns all the others off. Now, memory is cheap, RAM is cheap, hard drive space is cheap. I'm not concerned about my file size. Back in the day, I would be. So I would probably want to work in I won't say more efficient way, because it wasn't efficient. It was just because, you know, memory was at a premium. I didn't want a large file size, and now I just don't care. It really becomes a non-issue. So that's how I combine those. So now I'll go back with the rectangular marquee tool. I'll select this area here, Option or Alt, delete, and I fill it with the white pixels, Command D to deselect. And then make sure you save it and you're done. You're ready to go. So selection tools, there's a lot of different ways of making selections to isolate components of one photograph and combine them with another. Now they have combined all of the elements for us into one file, but when you start working on your postcard assignment, those selected images will be from separate files that you're going to want to combine into one. Okay, so that will raise a different set of issues that I will have to address probably next week. But as I said, you know, if you want to add drop shadows to each of the individual elements, then you don't want to combine it just yet. You want to turn that on and then turn all of, you know, here, let me turn all of these on. I'm going to click them all on there. Select all of these. But let's say I want to add a drop shadow to the muscle. And that was this, which one was it? It was this one right here. See, I guess I should have labeled them all. Oh, I need to turn on that. There we go. So which one is that? I guess, see that reason for turning on and turning off layers. There we go. I got to turn that back on. That's why. So let's see. Yeah, that is the one right there. So if I want to add a drop shadow to that layer, you select the layer and then I come down here to the layers panel and under effects, I can go ahead and I can add a drop shadow, and that would be kind of nice. And then you can work with the direction of the light and the distance and the hardness and that sort of thing. But if I try to do that afterwards, it's much harder. You want to do that before you flatten it. But because I work non-destructively, I can go back and do that without much muss or fuss. Okay, so I can turn all that back on and I'm done. Does that answer your question? Any other questions that you have for me? I'm going to check, let's see who's here. Angela Zepeda. I got people from the Tuesday, Thursday section too, which is just another section. So hold on here. I'm going to take some notes. I'm continuing to record here. I have seen some of them and they look fine. The question is, have I seen some of your finished lessons in Google Drive? Yes. Now I don't grade them now. I just wait until the end of the semester. And when they're all there, you get the full credit. You get 10 points. If I see serious problems with them, I will let you know. But so far they look good. They're just fine. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to log off, but I am going to go ahead and pause and I may end up ending this webinar soon, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording and just say that will be it for today, unless there's some other questions that some of you have. So have a good weekend, work on this lesson. On Monday, I will be working on lesson 6. I'm sorry, no, we're going to be working on lesson 4, and on Wednesday, we will be working on lesson 6. The other thing that I wanted to mention too is that some of you are attending Monday, Wednesday, but you're in the other section, and that is perfectly fine. What happened yesterday on Tuesday is that just a few people attended, and so I might wind up not offering the Tuesday, Thursday webinars after all. I might wind up just having the Monday, Wednesday ones, since that's when most of you are available, and have the recordings available on YouTube and also on Canvas. And that's where you'll be able to go if you can't attend the live webinar. But there were just a few people who were there. So let me go ahead and for now, I'm going to pause. And this could be it for today. And then we'll end our meeting. So bye-bye for now. Oh, hold on here. Textbook lessons. I made them available to all of you. You can either download them from the publisher, Or what you can do is if you go to the shared Google Drive that I made available to everybody here, this is for our class right here. That's Art 195, my mistake. Let's go to Art 192. So here's 192, Monday, Wednesday, or the Tuesday, Thursday. I'll leave that up. And click here, and there's a folder that I have in here that says PSCC 2020 lesson files. If you double click in there, for each one of the lessons, today we worked on lesson 3, and here are the start and end files for each, and you just drag them from here, drag that folder onto your desktop, and you'll have a copy of it. Does that make sense, Giovanni? Yes? Okay. So let me move that. And so now I will. I'm going to go ahead and pause. So that will be the end of, unless there aren't any more questions, that will be the end of my recording today. But I'm just going to pause.